I wanted to quickly show you how to put together your pieces so that you can check to see if your sleeve is actually fitting into the armhole after you've made all of your fitting adjustments. So what I've done here is, as I said, it's sort of got this semi-princess seam type of style, and I've put them together matching up those seam lines. So I've laid the pattern pieces together so that they will make my complete armhole. So I've got my front patterns here and my back patterns here. And then I'll just bring in my sleeve. And what you're going to notice is that I've actually flipped my sleeve upside down. So the right side of my pattern is on this side here. And I've just flipped it upside down, and that's just simply so that I can walk my pattern exactly as if I'm stitching it together. So what I'm doing here is I'm lining up the seam line of the sleeve here on the front side to the front of my base of my armhole here of the front bodice pattern. And I'm just pivoting it until those seam lines are matching exactly. And every time I get to the point where the seam line of one of the pattern pieces is leaning away from the other, I'm going to pivot it a little bit more. Whenever I see a notch point or a dot or anything that needs to be transferred to one side or the other, I will just make a little mark and continue walking my pattern. So I'm hoping that you guys can see this as I pivot around. And you can see here I drew a dot where the princess seam is actually matching up to the sleeve seam line here. And I'm going to continue walking my pattern around. I'm pivoting it as I go. So again, taking a step each time those seam lines start to move away from each other and pivoting at that last point where they were joined. And I'm going to go around and keep pivoting until I get to the shoulder seam line of the bodice. And you're going to see here I actually marked it on my sleeve. So this is where my front shoulder line is going to land. Okay, so there is almost always ease in a sleeve head. So even though the middle dot here, that usually indicates that you're going to match this to the shoulder seam line, we're going to actually walk our back now to see where it will land. If this dot is in the middle of those two marks, we're good to go. Our notch position is good. But let's continue. We'll do the back now. So again, I'm keeping my sleeve face side down because I'm going to walk it as if I'm sewing it together. So you know you always put right sides together when you're stitching. So once again, I'm going to line up the base of the armhole of the sleeve and the bodice together here at the seam line. I'm just going to stack up those seam lines until they start to converge away from each other. And then I'm going to do another little pivot. And I'm going to move along here as I go. And so here I'm just going to put a little dot where that seam line for the back princess seam goes together. And again, just following along. And then every time that there's an inconsistency between where my back markings were, I'm going to just adjust. And you'll notice that I'm using a different color, so I know which color to follow along with. And then I'm going to keep on walking the pattern, going around. Okay, so you can see here, this is my back shoulder line seam line. So I'm going to make a mark where that landed as well. So this is how I can actually indicate where all of my markings are. So one of the things I forgot to check as I was walking along, I can see here, is that I forgot to double check where my notches were and if they were matching up in the correct position. So I'm just going to go back and see that they are. So yes, they are stacked up exactly. I'm just going to confirm that that is the correct position for the double notch. That's just how I've transferred my double notch through. This one over here is my single notch for my front. So I wanted to make sure that I marked that as well. So one of the things I wanted to point out for you here that a lot of people sort of misunderstand about this dot here that you'll find on sewing patterns, and that is that this dot is always in the center of any easing that you have in the sleeve head. So you can see here, if I measure this along the seam line, I've got 1¼ inches of ease in this sleeve head. So in other words, my circle, the big circle here that you find, it's going to be at 5/8 of an inch. So it's in a pretty good spot. It's just ever so slightly off. This is good, okay? So this is a really good position for the dot. I know I don't have to make any adjustments there. I've got enough ease in my sleeve head, and I've just walked my sleeve.